Hi folks, I'm Duncan Gill, child and adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm Victoria Lee, licensed clinical mental health counselor, and welcome to Is There a Med for That? The podcast about teen mental health and behavioral problems and what to do about them.
Victoria and I have been working for years together with kids. Sometimes we use therapy, sometimes medication, sometimes we give some guidance to parents.
And sometimes kids just need to be left alone.
We don't have all the answers, but we probably have some of them. We'll do our best to share what we've learned over the years working with struggling kids and their families.
We hope you enjoy the show and we can be helpful to those who have taken on the hardest job in the world, being a parent. All right, and today we were hoping to go over a couple of questions that we had emailed to us from parents out there at large in the community.
At large, as if they're criminals.
Looming over us. Do you want to start, Dunc, by jumping right into the questions today?
Sure, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah. All right, you got them right there.
I've got a list of questions from, I'd like to say listeners, but right now they're parents because we don't have a huge following quite yet.
Not yet.
All right.
Hopefully by next week we're pretty big.
Question from Amanda in Nashua. Let's see. How would you handle a situation with your child when you were already at your wit's end?
So important. I think it's a really great first question, too, for our show, because I think a lot of parents who are going to be tuning in are going to have that experience, right? That they are at their wit's end. Maybe more often they've found it themselves in the past in that situation. And so our approach is particularly good for when you find yourself in that situation. And when I talk about our approach, we'll get more into that in depth on later episodes. We call it holistic education. There's a lot of information out there at large. It's going to be my thing today in the community and on our website if you want more information at this point, but we will be talking more about it. But a good first question, because our approach really helps parents when they're feeling overwhelmed. And the very first thing we recommend doing if you find yourself in that situation when you are handling maybe a crisis with your child, or maybe not a crisis, maybe you're just in a crabby mood and something they're doing that's perfectly okay is just rubbing the wrong way.
Throw an example out just so you get
Great idea.
Sense. So let's say your 16-year-old daughter is lying in bed and you've been exhausted and had a crappy day at work, and you got a headache, and you go up and what are we asking her to do? Empty the dishwasher, okay? Because nobody's emptied the dishwasher in like 4 days. And we say, hey, could you help with the dishwasher? And you're already in a really crummy mood. And she says, go to hell or something like that. She's right in a bad mood too. And you just want to blow up and do all kinds of bad stuff that you'd regret later.
Like give her the finger maybe?
For example. Let's not talk about that right now.
I did that.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. I think the context can be helpful. So in that moment, we recommend if the moment you start to feel dysregulated, that you're way more emotional, and you're coming from your emotional self more than from your rational self, we recommend that you just pause, right? And if you can in that moment, it sounds cheesy, but even count to 10. And if that doesn't calm you down enough, which oftentimes it doesn't when you're in that space, literally take space. Unless there's a crisis, if there's an emergency situation, which we often will call train track moments, right? If your kid's on the tracks and the train's right there, please don't take space. Pull your kid off the track. Do what you got to do. But there's no emergency if, it goes into day 5 with the dishes not being taken out, even though in the moment it can feel like that. But it's our job as parents to be the leader in that moment. And we can feel overwhelmed, but we don't have to act overwhelmed. And so you embrace your feeling of being overwhelmed at your wit's end. It's okay to be human, and you can role model that for your kids, that you're human too, you're frustrated, and take space. So that's where you're going to guide your behavior. You walk out of the room, you can calmly just let her know, I'm super frustrated right now. I think I got to go take some space for a bit. Maybe we can talk about this later, and just excuse yourself and calm down. So now you're role modeling for her what to do when you're overwhelmed. And instead of, staying there and fighting, engaging in adversarial dynamic with that person, which just means fighting, right? Being warlike with them, this person that you love in life, you can role model walking away and taking that space and calming down and regulating. Because if you sit there and fight, we usually don't see much good come from that.
No, kids have more energies and they'll ultimately, quote, win, end quote, which really doesn't mean winning, but they'll outlast you. I think there's a temptation, even if, beyond just feeling really frustrated, to be a parent, and almost walking away feels like a little bit of a failure, perhaps, because you feel like you ought to be able to assert your authority or your role as a parent, and immediately respond in some kind of way that's going to help your child out or grow up.
And I think sometimes it comes from maybe not even as noble of a place. It's more just because you want that done, right? And I'm the parent, and I said so.
Right.
Damn it.
Damn it! Empty the dishwasher.
Yeah, very reasonable request, right?
Yeah. So let's say you are able to take space. What's the next step?
I want to just jump in real quick too and mention humbling yourself is really important, because I think you really hit that on the head, Dunc, with how, like, in that moment, because I'm the parent, right? You want there sometimes to be a certain reaction from your child, but other people's reactions often have nothing to do with us, and we can only control our side of the street. That's even true with our kids or our spouse, and that can be extra painful because we hopefully love our spouse and our kids, and we want to feel that we can have influence over them, but in that moment they might not be granting us influence, and that's okay. But humility in parenting is a really big part of our approach, and sometimes I think that ultimately at first can be deflating for some parents, but it can also be super liberating.
It can feel like a defeat, right? You can walk out feeling like you just lost.
Yeah.
But
which, welcome to parenthood in a certain way, right?
You lost as soon as you had the kid, right?
Right, in like the best way ever, right? Because it's no longer about you.
Right.
In so many ways. It's about hopefully a lot bigger things, and about our kids. Yeah.
And you have a chance both to role model taking space and having really angry feelings and not succumbing or giving into them. You also have the ability, you have an opportunity if you mess up and give your child the finger or threaten to tear up homework, you have an opportunity to take some space and then apologize for it, and turn it into a victory of sorts.
Yeah, an opportunity. It's a great way to, again, kind of cheesy sometimes, but the moment can feel like a crisis, but it could actually be a great opportunity, right? Even when it might not be in the feel-good category, right? Yeah, and so that you're also hitting on this idea of putting relationship before content. And so we're trying to focus on our relationship. So instead of jumping into a fight, because damn it, the dishes are so important, right? We're going to focus on our relationship. And we can have a positive relationship even when we don't feel good. We can still do that as humans. And that's a gift. Because oftentimes in life, there's going to be ups and downs and times when we don't feel good. And we want to role model for our kids that we can still have good relationships with one another even when we're not feeling good.
I think that's great that you point that out, that suddenly the content becomes much less important. We do that a lot of work, where it can be very easy to get stuck in the details. Well, it hasn't been emptied for 4 days, and just get lost in those details. And it can happen in all kinds of arguments, right? All kinds of people. But suddenly, stepping back is important and taking a look at the larger picture of
First things first.
First things first.
Yeah. Yeah, stepping back. It's a real big skill, and that's often what taking space allows us to do, is take that step back. And just to point out, too, it is important. We will eventually get to those details. We will eventually get there, but the idea of first things first is that we're not going to let the details of the dishes come before our loving relationship with our kid.
Even if we don't feel super loving towards them at the time.
Yeah, and that's important to embrace, because we do have moments, right, in our life where we don't feel very loving to maybe anyone or anything, even our kids, and that can be humbling to admit. And hopefully it's, less time than when we do feel loving towards them. but maybe we're going through a crisis in our own life and we don't have control over that.
Right. That's another good point. There could be something, it's tempting immediately to think there's something wrong with your child, which in this case it sounds like. But perhaps your frustration tolerance is really low and you need something yourself. If you're constantly sleep deprived or angry or
Overworked.
depressed or
Yep.
anxious, maybe time to take care of yourself so you're not living on the edge all the time, which doesn't excuse your child saying go to hell.
No.
But if you're always on the edge, then this is going to happen a lot to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're noticing in your life, you're often at your wit's end, pausing and taking a step back in that moment, but even at large in your life.
Did you just say at large again?
I did. I'm not sure where
I
that's
think
coming from.
that's our first callback. Yeah. Right? Isn't that what this
What's a
is called?
callback?
A callback when you make a joke. Like Letterman used to do. You call back and then you come back to it over and over again. You go back to the well.
All right.
Like, so you can do it next
Callback.
episode too.
All right. Might be my thing.
I think it's we're looking sort of for a shtick here, right?
Yeah. We're trying to find ourselves on our podcast. It's the next developmental milestone.
I don't know, Vicki, if you wanted to actually go farther into what you do when you return or if that...
Yeah. I love that. Let's keep going with it.
All right.
So we dealt with the part when you're in that emotional state, you're dysregulated, and you're taking space, going to get regulated. Sometimes you can take 5 minutes and that might calm you down. Other times it might need to be longer, right? And one of Joe's, so Joe is the founder of the program that Duncan and I run. 13 years ago you guys founded
14,
it?
I think.
14 now. And we'll mention him a lot on the podcast. But I forget what I was going to say.
Joe, something or other. There's a lot to think about with Joe, so it's not surprising you get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Stepping back, how long would you take space for?
He would often say nothing eternal is at stake. Sometimes we feel that pressure that we have to get back in there and get back on that issue. And oftentimes there's no time pressure, right? Like we can take a little longer if we need to, and often it's better to take longer if you aren't in that space. If your spirit's not right, if you're going to walk back in there and start a fight or yell and role model unhealthy behavior, not time to go back in yet. But say you are, like however much time you need to get to that spot, we'd recommend you go back and humbly ask, hey, is now an okay time to talk? I know I got upset before, and I just wanted to process that with you a little bit.
Yeah, and actually that time is good for your child too, right? To have a little bit of space to reflect on maybe what they just did or said. And if you go immediately into a fight, there's no time for your child necessarily to reflect either and say, oh my God, I was just a jerk to my parent. So,
Right.
But yeah, so you humble yourself.
Yeah. And one thing we recommend often is you start by asking, is now an okay time to talk? Which a lot of parents at first find odd, but especially with teenagers, we don't want to just walk in and assume that they should speak to us right now. Right? If we're just going about life and we're all in the same room, yeah, obviously just keep talking to each other and interact. But if you're going into their bedroom, right, ask hey, is now an okay time to check in, especially if you have something not fun to check in about, like doing the dishes.
It's also good in that it puts a little bit of pressure on the child, who either has an opportunity to say, no, I don't, you jerk, or has an opportunity. It puts a little bit of responsibility on them. It's kind of like being nice when somebody insults you, and you're the one who actually looks like a jerk. Wait, who looks like a jerk? The other person looks like a jerk.
Or
You know what I'm saying?
no, I do know. I'm following you. So if I ask a humble question, right, is now an okay time to check in, and you respond with something like, no, you jerk. If I'm humble, I almost act like a mirror, right, where they're left looking at themselves.
Right.
Whereas if I walk in there all worked up, that mirror is already turbulent, right?
They can just focus on you.
Yeah. And that's an irresistible distraction for most people, never mind teenagers, with their parent. And we don't want to be that distraction. We want to help align kids and help kids regulate and see things clearly. Really important. Yeah, so we request that is now an okay time to talk. We have, and then maybe they respond negatively, and we can ask them about that. But maybe they just say, right now is not a good time. Like I'm wicked tired, really bad day at school. And if nothing huge is at stake, maybe this is a big issue because maybe the dishwasher was something that they had committed to doing by the end of today.
Not only that, but gives an opportunity for something you may not expect at all, which is for a child to apologize.
Yeah.
If you immediately take that space away and go in guns a-blazing, you're never going to have that moment. But some of the parents we work with who actually ask those questions can be shocked that their child actually has a soul and is willing to apologize for something they did. That occasionally happens.
Right. So if you walk in with humility and you ask now an okay time to talk, right, and they say, yeah, Mom, totally, and I know I didn't do the dishes yet. Sometimes kids will surprise us in that way because they know what's on your mind, right? And then that's great. I even the other piece too, like what that brought up for me was the way we talk to our kids. They're picking that up, right? And so if you don't want your kid just to fling open your bedroom door and say, "Hey, Mom, you said 20 times today already that you would drive me to basketball, and it's been 4 hours," like, what's your problem? If we don't want our kid to talk to us like that, then we shouldn't talk to our kids like that. It's not helpful.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I noticed the other day, driving in the car, and I forget what they even asked, but my two of my kids were in the far back in the minivan, which is kind of funny that I drive a minivan now.
We all go through it at some point.
Oh, that's great.
It's not a defeat.
Yeah, it's an opportunity.
Embrace it.
Embrace it. But they're in the back, and they were actually something. The younger one did something that was a little bit questionable, and my older son, who was only 18 months older than him, but the oldest in the family, he asked him a humble question, and that was
a 3-year-old.
4. He's 4. He just
4.
turned 4 now.
Okay,
big birthday.
Yeah. Still impressive.
Yeah, and it felt. I realized, okay, like we're on the right track because they're interacting that way with each other. And it felt nice to have, his older brother ask him a question versus tell him, stop it, and it was good. It was powerful. And so I think just more that reflecting on the way that we act is our role modeling is how we can help our kids learn.
So, Victoria, let's say, the daughter says, "Didn't I tell you to go to hell?"
Yeah. Right. Well, in that moment, right? So did she already say that, can we back up just a minute and go back to, all right, so you're going to be her and I'll be the mom.
Right.
All right. So I calmed down. I took some space. It's an hour or two later. Did some yoga, did some deep breathing. Not that you have to do that at all, but that'd be nice. I don't have time to do any of that anymore right now in my life. I'd knock on the door and say, "Hey, hon, just wonder if now's an okay time to talk."
Fine.
And I am noting him quietly in my head, not out loud. I'm noting that she has a little bit of an attitude, a negative attitude. I'm just noting that. I'm not going to jump on that yet. I'm going to further explore the situation. And I'm going to say, "Thank you. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me. And it seems like you got some stuff you're doing here. So I really do appreciate that. I want to say sorry. I'm really sorry that I came up here an hour or so ago and just flung the door open and demanded that you do the dishes. Or, I think I was in a lot of stuff has been going on today, which isn't your problem at all. And I was feeling a little bit dysregulated, and I apologize for my spirit towards you."
What's dysregulated mean?
Dysregulated, when you're like all over the place emotionally, you're not like centered or balanced feeling.
Huh.
And sometimes when I feel dysregulated, I'm not acting in a healthy way.
Well, I changed my mind. I don't want to talk about it.
You don't want to talk about anything.
Just leave me alone.
Okay, that's fair enough. I can leave you alone. This is the first time we're checking in about it. Can we I had a question about the dishes, which can wait. I can totally leave you alone about it. Is there a time that we could talk?
I just don't want to talk about it at all.
You don't want to talk about the dishes at all?
Nope.
Well, at some point, I think we might need to do that if as a family we're going to have clean dishes.
Why?
Well, if they don't ever get done or we don't share that, I wonder, do you think that's going to lead to us having clean dishes or us all getting along and functioning well?
You're really pissing me off.
That is not my intention. I'm sorry. I can tell you're upset. We can come back to this, but it'd be really helpful if you could tell me when we can come back to this.
Later.
Later today?
Fine.
I appreciate that. Sounds good. And I'd take some space and we'd come back to it. Now, if this was the third time that we've talked about this, I might not come back to it. I might say, you know what, we gotta work this out now, because I don't want to enable them just delay. So I'm asking myself, where is there an imbalanced behavior that's happening? And the imbalanced behavior is that they're avoiding taking responsibility for something. Right? But if it's the first time, I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to work with them, right? And I'm working with them even if it's the fourth time, but I'm going to work with them in a way that I ensure I'm not going to enable an imbalanced avoidance. And we can get more into this part of our approach later in a different podcast, but we have a process called the 4 R's, where you actually walk through from reflecting, which we did when we took space, all the way to a group member, a family member, a group member, however you want to define it, decides that they don't want to practice being a member of the family, which sounds really daunting, but it's really not that daunting. We can walk you through that process and how to then welcome them back in and all team back up. So our approach is all about teaming up together as a family.
So I'm not the girl anymore.
Thank you for that.
I need to do a high-pitched voice next time.
Oh, that'd be great.
So actually, this was really mostly about reflection. Could you explain that? So this is the first of 4 steps.
All right. Before we lose our listeners, Dunc, maybe we should come back to our original question.
Right. The original question was, how would you handle a situation with your child when you're already at your wit's end?
Right. And then we use this scenario of a 16-year-old teenage girl in her room, and we were upset about her not having done or unloaded the dishwasher yet.
And she told you to go to hell.
And she told you to go to hell, right? And you were having a rough day, and so you were feeling emotional and upset, frustrated. There aren't any of those words, right? When you're at your wit's end. Done. I'm trying to really embody, feel it in my body, what it feels like to be at my wit's end. We recommend taking space, which is actually one of our guidelines that we use in our program that goes along with our approach. We'll be talking about other guidelines at different points in our podcast, but this one that we're highlighting today is take space when emotionally overwhelmed. Calmly request space when emotionally overwhelmed. Ideally, you calmly request it. Hey, Dunc, I'm just feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Do you mind if I head out for the day or, for a minute? Duncan's also my boss, so I was thinking I was overwhelmed at work. And
Wait, is that
I went for the whole day.
Question?
No. I'm overwhelmed in this podcast moment.
Totally. I think that was pretty good. I'll probably leave it at that.
Duncan's done. He's at his wit's end.
I'm done.
Thank you for joining today.
See you next time.
See you next time.